Good afternoon, distinguished dignitaries. Honorable Dr. Jitendra Singh, Minister of State, Independent Charge for the Ministry of the Development of the Northeast Region and Minister of State for the Prime Minister's Office, Personnel, Public Grievances, Pensions, Department of Atomic Energy and Department of Space. Esteemed Vice Chancellor, University of Jammu, Professor Manoj K. Dhar, Professor Monica Sethi, HOD, Department of English, University of Jammu, and ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to present the first edition of the prestigious Kunwar Vyogi Annual Memorial Lecture being held in collaboration with the Department of English, University of Jammu. The vision of the Honorable Vice Chancellor has enabled the Trust to bring distinguished personalities to the students for learning through example. The first edition of the Kunwar Vyogi Annual Memorial Lecture will have its reach far and wide as it is online, thus becoming a representation of Jammu University's pursuit for excellence and innovation. Kunwar Vyogi Annual Lecture endeavors to invite prominent personalities to drive debate on social, political, and cultural challenges and to share their vision of shaping a more equitable, enhanced, and evolved world. It encourages people to enter into dialogue and break new ground for collective well-being. Dogri is now also the... Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Dogri is also now the official language of the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir. And I'd like to congratulate Jitendra Singh, sir, for leading such an endeavor and achieving a great feat for Dogras everywhere. And this gives the Kunwar Vyogi Memorial Trust and all those who are associated with us the impetus to keep our mission going, to keep on striving to achieve new heights, promote our culture, and lead innovation primarily through the creativity of the youth. Dr. Jitendra Singh is a diabetes specialist of international repute, professor of diabetes and endocrinology, a noted intellectual, author, and invited faculty to all major national and South Asian diabetes conferences, and a social activist as well as a flag bearer of Dogra culture. I would now like to invite him for the first Kunwar Vyogi Annual Memorial Lecture on the way forward for J&K post the abrogation. Dr. Jitendra, sir, over to you.
Thank you, Ayushman, for your very generous introduction. For a while, I started thinking that you were talking about somebody else, because when you are in active politics and in public life, you tend to, your academic aspects tend to get underplayed, and if you try to overplay them, then you're not taken seriously in public life. But nevertheless, that is indeed the legacy that all of us share. So joining us this afternoon, I have to first acknowledge the presence of Vice Chancellor, University of Jammu, our colleague in the fraternity and an eminent scientist in the field of biotechnology, Professor Manoj Dhar. And that is something in common that both of us share. Dr. Monica Sethi, the head of department, English, and of course, our very talented, upcoming, versatile person called Ayushman. It is, I was very keenly listening to Professor Dhar, and the thought that occurred to me was, he was speaking in the terms of the DNA, and I think this is one of the best instances of DNA showing its reflection over here in this program in the form of Ayushman. The manner in which he and his siblings have carried forward the legacy of their legendary father, Kunwar Vyogi ji, with whom I shared a very cozy and a very warm relationship. He was our friend, our senior, and in a way our Guru Bhai, because we were actually introduced to each other, I think primarily because of our common relationship with Vedpal Deep, in whose genre later on his poetry also got nourished. And I think he was among those handful of original writers in the language of Dogri, which was pioneered by persons like Vedpal Deep. And it's also a very pleasant coincidence that after Dogri having become an official language for the working in the Union Territory of Jammu and Kashmir, and thereafter Professor Dhar having very thoughtfully set up a department of Dogri language and the Dogri studies. This is, I think, possibly the first of its kind academic program being held, and that too under the aegis of the University of Jammu. I have been asked to speak in the terms of the change that has happened over the last 1 year or so. So, to put it very precisely, I think I shall begin by what I said in the Parliament during the debate on the abrogation of Article 370 on the 5th and 6th of August 2019, precisely 5th in Rajya Sabha and 6th on Lok Sabha. I had said that in a single sentence you could describe Article 370 as a miscarriage of history and an anomaly of constitution. And a miscarriage because it led to writing of a 70 years long history of nightmare, and therefore a miscarriage which was dubious to the cycle of history, and an anomaly of constitution because it was supposed to be a temporary provision which continued to remain permanently temporary for as long as 70 years. And the question that the future historian, the future analyst may sometimes feel prompted to look into or search into it is that why it was allowed to happen, why this temporary arrangement continued virtually permanently. In spite of the fact that the authors of this provision, the protagonists of this constitutional provision were themselves of the belief that this was going to be a very transitory arrangement, a very temporary arrangement. We have ample record to state that, we have ample evidence to say that, because being students of science like Professor Dhar and me, we have been taught not to speak without evidence, and therefore if we go through the minutes of the discussions that happened in the Constituent Assembly during 1946-47, there were occasions when more than once Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, who's credited as the protagonist or initiator of this provision, had himself admitted and put across that this was going to be a temporary provision. In fact, on one of the discussions when Syama Prasad Mukherjee expressed certain apprehensions, Nehruji tried to pacify him and said, Dr. Mukherjee, don't be upset. This is going to fade out in the course of time. The exact phrase he used in Urdu was that ye ghiste ghiste ghis jayegi. And thereafter, soon after the passing away of Pandit Nehru and Shastri ji took over as Prime Minister, there was an elaborate debate in the Parliament. And in reply to that, the then Home Minister, Mulzari Lal Nanda, and this is also part of the parliamentary proceeding records, had himself admitted that the entire House is virtually unanimously of the opinion that the time has come that Article 370 should be done away with or it should go. And therefore, with due respect to the sentiment of the House, we also admit that the time has come, but we'll have to work on it. Give us some more time, we'll find a way out, we'll make a roadmap and how best we can actually make an exit. But then thereafter, as all of us know, things happened very dramatically, very rapidly. There was a war, and then Shastri all of a sudden passed away in Tashkent. Mrs. Indira Gandhi took over, Sheikh Abdullah was brought in, and then the entire course of history changed. I'm not going to detail into that because that will take the whole day. But nevertheless, I think that was the turning point and also a watershed. The time around the middle of the 1960s, because thereafter, all those who took over the reins of power, both at the center in New Delhi or in Jammu and Kashmir, increasingly started realizing the benefit of clinging on to power by using the bogey of this special status or Article 370. So it became more of a vested interest, in other words. And at the risk of sounding unorthodox, I have also said quite often that this special status itself was selectively used or misused or even abused by those who claim to be the most vociferous votaries of it. And there are any number of examples. If a certain provision did not suit them or was not compatible to their continuance in power or their dynastism, they would resist it, they would obstruct it in the name of special status. If it suited them, it was otherwise. Like, for example, one of the notable examples is that during emergency of the many amendments that Mrs. Gandhi brought in during that brief period, one of them was the article, the amendments 41, 42, which is very notoriously remembered in the history. And one of the provisions that was brought in by way of that amendment was increasing the term of the parliament as well as all the state assemblies to 6 years from 5 years, because she had received certain inputs that the election was not a compatible time, a favorable time for her to hold elections. And most of the states were being ruled by the Congress party. But soon after, in 1977, when Morarji Bhai took over as Prime Minister, he brought in another amendment called 45, 46, wherein all these provisions were reversed and the term was restored back to 5 years. At that point in time, Sheikh Abdullah was the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir. When the first amendment was brought in by Mrs. Indira Gandhi, he immediately adopted it and converted the term of the Jammu Kashmir Assembly to 6 years, regardless of the niceties or the courtesies of Article 370. But when it was reversed, then they took the refuge in the alibi of Article 370 and did not reverse it. As a result of which, till the day Jammu Kashmir became a union territory, continued to have a term of 6 years for almost 4 decades after it had been reversed in the rest of the country. So there are a number of examples. I'm not going into detail of that, but just to bring forth the point that the special status itself, or the Article 370 itself, was subject to facilitate the continuance of dynastism and to continue in power generation after generation for all long as 3 generations. And those political parties which swore by the name of autonomy, which swore by the name of self-rule, were actually the ones which abused the concept of autonomy and self-rule by denying it to the grassroots people of Jammu and Kashmir. For example, they were against holding panchayat elections, which were not held for years together. As all of us now recall, the panchayat elections were held after the governor rule was imposed. And even at that point in time, both these political parties which spoke of autonomy and self-rule decided to boycott them. Amendment 73 and 74 of the Constitution, which gives an extra empowerment to the local elected bodies like the panchayats and the block commissions, and whereby the entire central grant has to is routed directly to these elected representatives in the local bodies, was also not implemented by the successive governments in Jammu and Kashmir, in spite of the fact that 73 and 74 amendment was brought by the Congress government led by Rajiv Gandhi, and for years together the same party was in coalition in the government, but it was not implemented. So, self-rule for whom? It was rather rule of the self, because as far as we understand, the essence of democracy is that self-rule has to emanate from the ground, from the grassroots. It has to be born from the bottom. And that is, in fact, the basic structure of a democracy, of a healthy democracy. So this was just a point I tried to make, that I think a good riddance has happened, and to those who were led to believe that they would be coming to harm or disadvantage by this change of constitutional arrangement would in the course of time realize that in fact they were being taken to ransom and they were actually being taken for a ride by those who used the earlier arrangement to actually bluff their own masses. Now, coming straight to what changed after the 5th and 6th of August 2019, I think you would recall that just before these eventful dates and even on the eve of this 5th and 6th, a lot of apprehensive prophecies were sought to be made. Somebody said there would be bloodshed, somebody said there would be earthquake, somebody said there would be volcanoes erupting. But now, as I said, we will talk only with evidence. If you go back and see the records from August onwards, the 6 months that followed in 2019 were, I think, the most peaceful festive season in the history of last 35 years of militancy or terrorism in Jammu and Kashmir. Incidentally, it was during this period you had the festival of Eid, you had the festival of Muharram, on the other side you had the festival of Deepavali, you had the festival of Holi, you had two national festivals, namely the Independence Day, the Republic Day, and never had there been an occasion in the past when on the eve of a Republic Day or an Independence Day, you didn't have an untoward incident, and the powers that we conveniently brushed it aside saying कि साहब ये पाकिस्तान की शरारत है, 15 अगस्त को कुछ ना कुछ तो करना ही है. But we didn't raise that. We didn't have to take refuge in that alibi because nothing of that sort happened. So the prophets of doom were proved wrong, which is, I think, in itself a vindication of the fact that it was an anomaly which was waiting to be corrected. Maybe it was destiny's will that somebody like Narendra Modi should take over the Prime Minister of this country to undo this wrong of decades. And as far as the positive outcomes of this are concerned, I think you could broadly categorize them in 3 or 4 heads: the political outcomes, the administrative outcomes, the government outcomes, the cultural outcomes, which also includes the reference to Dogri, which was being made in the beginning of this program. Now, as far as the political outcomes are concerned, I hardly need to reiterate, we had a whole chunk of population which was deprived of citizenship rights, which was deprived of the voting rights for as many as 70 years. These displaced persons from Pakistan, the then West Pakistan. And in today's times and age, when if you even go abroad and settle after a couple of years, you are entitled to secure a green card or a citizenship of the country where you choose to settle. And I once said in the parliament, tongue in cheek, I said we have had 2 prime ministers in India who came over as refugees from Pakistan. One of them, Mr. Indra Kumar Gujral, who was a graduate of Government College Lahore and a very illustrious student. And Faiz Ahmed Faiz, incidentally, because this is also program linked with certain connoisseurs of literature. Faiz Ahmed Faiz was his professor, incidentally, because Faiz wrote in Urdu, was a teacher of English. I don't know whether Monica Sethi has also started writing in Urdu or not, but that is a matter of fact. So this illustrious person and the other one, another illustrious son of Pakistan, the then West Pakistan, was Dr. Manmohan Singh, who belonged to district Jhelum. And I once said, thank God they did not choose to settle in Jammu, because then destiny would have denied them the privilege of becoming Prime Minister, because they wouldn't have had the voting rights. And without a voting right, you don't become entitled to contest election as a member of parliament. So what a huge irony in today's times and age. Then, of course, the title of the program today was referring to 35A. I don't have to repeat that because it's been discussed so often, so elaborately that each one of us is now very familiar with it. But there were as many as, at least the irony is that it was not only depriving the daughters and sisters of Jammu and Kashmir from their legitimate property rights, etc., when they chose to marry outside, but at least there are 3 chief ministers, I don't wish to name them because many of us would be familiar when I make a hint, who had their own daughters and their own sisters who had to surrender this right to property just because they chose to marry a citizen who did not belong to Jammu and Kashmir. And you can see that was the compulsion of sticking on to power. I would not say the lust of power. So as far as 35A is concerned, I said I don't have to retreat it, I don't have to repeat it because we discussed so elaborately, so much in detail. Not only did it deprive our sisters and daughters of their property rights and the other rights after, in case they happen to choose to marry outside the then state of Jammu and Kashmir, but an irony which is sometimes missed is that there have been at least 3 chief ministers, I don't wish to name them because they would occur to us when I drop the hit, who had their own daughters or sisters deprived of the right to property because of 35A, because they chose to marry someone who did not belong to Jammu and Kashmir. But so compulsive was the lust to stick on to power that they did not mind their sisters, their own sisters, their blood sisters, or their daughters being deprived of it as long as it facilitated their continuance in power. Similarly, we had the Valmiki rights which have been sold. Now, as far as the administrative part is concerned, I think in the last 1 year or so, we have witnessed increasing amount of transparency coming in. We have increasing digitalization happening. E-governance, which was initiated at the center right after 2014 when Prime Minister Modi took over, was not taken up in Jammu and Kashmir for whatever reasons. Accountability has increased. We have a very vibrant grievance cell called CP Grams. Incidentally, since I also look after grievances, when we came in 2014, we used to receive only about 1.5 or 2 lakh complaints in the entire year, the whole of year. Today we received as many as about 20 lakh, about 10 times or 20 times more. So when I said this during a media briefing, a smart media person raised a query. He said, does this mean कि मोदी जी के आने के बाद लोगों की शिकायतों की संख्या बढ़ गई है? तो I said नहीं. इसका जवाब आज से 150 साल पहले मिर्जा गालिब दे गए थे जब उन्होंने कहा कि जब तवक्को ही उठ गई गालिब क्यों किसी का गिला करे कोई. So you make a complaint, you register a grievance where you have the expectation of redressal. And since we became prompt, we were responsive, we followed disciplined timelines, people came forward. And that is called citizen centricity in governance. That has started in Jammu and Kashmir only after it became a union territory, came directly under the control of the central government. Now we have a CP Gram grievance cell there, which is connected directly with the central portal with a timeline fixed, which has been very recently introduced. The interviews were abolished at the center. And if you recall, it was in 2015. On the Independence Day, Prime Minister spoke from the ramparts of Red Fort and made a suggestion. He said, is it possible that we do away with this practice of interview? Because the exact words that he used was कि जब interview का कॉल आता है घर में तो ऐसे मानो भूचाल आ जाता है, कोई यहाँ दौड़ता है, कोई वहाँ दौड़ता है कि किससे सिफारिश कराएं, कहाँ से चेक लगवाएं. And actually this is what is happening, because a meritorious candidate would score 95%, even 98% in the written test, but he would be conveniently shunted out or dropped by using the route of interview or viva, and someone other or some other candidate who would not have done so well in the written test would be given extra marks in the interview. So that is how the nepotism was going on, favoritism was going on, maybe corruption also going on. And we made repeated pleas to the then state government. I personally wrote as many as at least 12 letters to the different chief ministers in the state that we have done away with interviews at the center, because Prime Minister made this call on the 15th of August 2015, and the department concerned happens to be the Department of Solar Training, DOPT, with which also I am affiliated. So we worked on it on a war footing, and within 3 months we made sure that the following New Year, on the 1st of January 2016, interviews were polished all over India except Jammu and Kashmir. And repeatedly, and when I would informally ask them, बोले साहब अब अपने लोगों को कहाँ रखेंगे, अगर ऐसा करेंगे तो अब हमें तो समझ नहीं आता कि प्रजातंत्र में अपने लोग कौन होते हैं, कि भाई दूसरों के बच्चे अपने नहीं होते. और जम्मू में भी ये कहा जाता था. दैट इज द आयरनी. जो महाराजा हरि सिंह की पूजा करते हैं, महाराजा हरि सिंह soon after he took over the oath, his first word, the first sentence that he spoke was कि hereafter my religion is justice and my children is my praja. So we had actually, when extraneous considerations came in governance, they also led to corrupting the entire cultural milieu of the place. And that's why I said there are huge cultural outcomes also, which I'll speak in a moment. But before that, as far as the development was concerned, you had large number of projects which had either come to standstill. I mean, often this is not talked about, and the media is also not interested, because most often they are occupied by trying to discover who murdered whom or who eloped with whom. But the matter of fact is, and this is on record, there are a number of national level projects which had either come to standstill or which were not receiving the kind of push that they deserved. And it was in the last 1 year that they have been actually put on track. Like, for example, you have two important irrigation projects. One of them is Shahpur Kandi, which caters to the adjoining districts of the two border areas, the Kathua district in Jammu and Kashmir, Gurdaspur district, Pathankot district in the Punjab side. Now, this project was languishing, I think, for as long as it's not less than 40-45 years, beginning from middle of 1970s. But maybe the political considerations, the priorities were such that they were not interested in bringing a project in this region, because that was not their vote bank. And if this project had been allowed to materialize, it would have irrigated the entire belt on the two adjoining sides of Jammu and Kashmir and Punjab, and this entire Kandi area, which is spoken of as along Kathua and Samba, would have never been known as Kandi. And the irony is that whenever there is some kind of a tense moment with Pakistan, some of these votaries at the top of head rise up to say, Pakistan ka pani band kar do, Pakistan ka pani band kar do, without realizing that according to the Indus Water Treaty, we had three major rivers which came to our share, three to them. For example, they got Jhelum, they got Sindhu, they got Chenab, we got Ravi, we got Beas, we got Satluj. So Ravi was the largest river that came to India's share. And because of this project not being allowed to develop, the entire share of India's water from river Ravi was going into Pakistan. And therefore, about 3 years back, when this again issue came up and these wise worthies started saying that Pakistan ka pani band kar do, I wrote a small note and handed it over to the Honorable Prime Minister, in which I said that those who say that water should be stopped do not realize that our own water is also going into Pakistan. So it was in the direct intervention of Mr. Modi. He directed his Principal Secretary, then Principal Secretary Nipendra Mishra, to sort it out, who in turn held a series of meetings with the Chief Secretaries of both sides. And finally, This project was announced by Prime Minister Modi, and now it's the work is going ahead. I think it will be complete in a year or so. Second project is a Kiru project, also a national level project, located in the same vicinity. Similarly, you have, and that this project, Kiru project, has been languishing since 1960s. In the power sector, you have two largest projects of North India, I think next to maybe Bhakra Nagar, the Pakal Dul project and the Kiru project in Kishtwar, whereas irrigation is Shahpur and Uj, not Kiru. So all this has happened only in the last 1 year, which means that if there is sufficient wish and sufficient will and objectivity of working, then this could have been possible. But when the extraneous considerations come in, your priorities are dictated by other considerations, then you put on hold some of the projects, you move some. And this in turn has also removed that grievance of regional imbalance, which was often heard. And I can say on the basis of statistics data that in the last 1 year or so, there has been absolutely equal distribution of central resources in both the divisions of Jammu and Kashmir. And some of the projects, in fact, Jammu has been a greater beneficiary because of the peculiarity of circumstances in the Kashmir Valley. Like one of the examples is AIIMS. AIIMS is virtually ready now in Jammu. We hope to have the first session of MBBS from this year. The orders of the appointment of director are going to be issued very soon. Whereas in Kashmir, even the land acquisition is not complete. One part of Ring Road was inaugurated the other day in the Jammu division. In Srinagar, the work is yet to start. Similarly, North India's first ever biotech park is coming up in Kathua. It's ready, I think, by the beginning of next year because there was a delay in Corona. But another similar biotech park was also allocated for Kashmir. There, the land acquisition is yet to take place. So I'm trying to say is that because the projects which were held up were given a push, as a result of which Jammu, which had possibly not got its share or always felt so, also received its share, and now we have an equitable development going on, and that too at the desired pace. Now, as far as the culture is concerned, of course, one part is the language which was being referred to by Professor Dhar and also Ayushman. It was an irony that the regional languages, the spoken languages did not get official recognition like in other states. So that anomaly has been done away with the recognition of Dogri. That would be just a small step actually in the service of Dogri, but that does not necessarily mean that it would promote Dogri overnight, because as I was saying in one of the interviews in Dogri on Doordarshan, that when the Dogri news bulletin on radio was stopped for almost 2 to 3 months, most of the votaries of Dogri language were left unaware. So they did not know that this had happened. Possibly because they don't listen to Dogri news, and that too on the radio. So one late night I received a call from one of my workers living in a remote village, and he said, "हम तो डोगरी की खबरें सुना करते थे, but वो 2-3 महीने से बंद हो गई हैं." So I couldn't believe that. I said, this is something it doesn't happen usually. But the next day when I checked out with the Director General of AIR News, she told me that yes, because of the Corona news bulletin having got extended, so we had to save on time. So we have suspended the Dogri bulletin, which was happening regularly morning and evening. And then we realized that nobody was actually complaining of it. So we were also trying to have an assessment of the listenership. And therefore we continued with the suspended arrangement. But I said, now I am complaining, so please undo it. And she was very prompt and very responsive. The same evening at 7:15, the bulletin was resumed. But ironically, there are dozens of now Dogra journalists, Dogra leaders, Dogra activists who possibly were not aware of it. So I think there's not much which has to be done, but a small effort has been made to give Dogri a kind of respectability that it looked forward to, and which was also denied because of the Kashmir-centric policies of the government, and which has been possible also because now we have a different arrangement, and beginning from the midnight of 31st October 2019, we have a union territory in place of a state. Now, if you go into the developmental aspects of it, there have been so many of the other activities in the last 1 week or so. For example, in the health sector, we had been granted as many as 8 or 9 centrally funded medical colleges by the Modi government. And since I was better placed to push my issue, so I managed to get 3 medical colleges for my constituency. I think the only constituency in India which got 3 medical colleges, one for Kathua, the other one for Udhampur, the third one for Doda. But I would always say that under the pressure of the electoral demand, I've got this medical college and also second AIIMS. But this would eventually end up only as a concrete building, not as a hospital. And once I also went to the extent of saying, though it was a little unpleasant, I told the then Chief Minister, I said, we have got 2 AIIMS for Jammu and Kashmir. Usually the AIIMS is for Sikh. But I shudder to think that we might end up with the first 2 Sikh AIIMS in Jammu and Kashmir. And she looked up with little displeasure. But what I meant to say is that we were short of faculty. We did not have the faculty. We could not start the Doda Medical College last year because we don't have the faculty. So the education sector suffered hugely because you expected a teacher to come all the way to Jammu or to Srinagar, put in his services for 30-35 years. At the end of the day, you say goodbye, or you host a good farewell party and ask him to find a place to put up his permanent residence. And the same was the case with the IAS officers, the All India Services officers. Many of these states actually facilitate the settlement of the IAS officers allocated to their state cadre. Like, for example, Karnataka has an arrangement wherein every IAS officer is provided with a piece of land at a subsidized rate. Similarly, Tamil Nadu also has housing schemes for allocation of and allotment of flats to the newly inducted IAS. Whereas over here, we were providing disincentive. And same was also the case with the industry. So the hospital sector suffered in a very, very huge quantum and a very huge magnitude. And I think the result of that is now coming in before us in the form of the corona crisis through which Jammu is currently going through. Because the inherent pitfalls in the system come to the surface visibly when the system gets challenged with a crisis, and that's precisely what happened. Like, for example, yesterday I was discussing it with the medical personnel in Jammu, and I said I'm amazed to hear the reports that there is lack of oxygen, because it was me who was instrumental in making sure that there was enough oxygen. Because about 3 months back, we were actually directed by the Honorable Prime Minister that, since I also look after Northeast, that we should make arrangement of sufficient amount of oxygen in the peripheral areas, like, for example, Northeast, Ladakh, Jammu Kashmir, so that if suddenly a situation arises, they don't have to be at a disadvantage. And in fact, it was Ladakh, the Lieutenant Governor got back to us and brought to our notice something which had slipped our mind. He said, we don't need oxygen because we already have oxygen generation plants over here in abundance, because this is a high altitude place. So in spite of that, so if oxygen was lacking or the patient felt that he was not getting the oxygen, maybe their oxygen cylinder was not working, there were certain logistic problems, the problems, the screw, the flow was not right. And this had perpetually existed, these pitfalls which now came to surface. And I'm sure Now with the new arrangement, with having the best of the persona, the best of persons, the best of expertise, not being disincentivized from coming to Jammu and Kashmir, we would have an enrichment of the teaching faculty. We would also have an enrichment of the medical healthcare, and we would also have enrichment of the industry, which in turn would lead to job generation and employment opportunities, because no government can actually provide government jobs to all. But a responsible government can take upon itself the duty or task of creating employability through capacity building, through skill building, and through enlarging the industrial sector, which hopefully would happen now. Say that more important all these physical aspects, also the cultural aspects, there's a huge positive outcome which is going to happen in the form of the change in the mindset. This 70 years of an anomalous arrangement made our minds slavish, slack, and self-assuming. So I would sum it up in 3 S's. We were slavish, koi baat ho wo kha gaya, koi ho wo kha gaya. So we were, robbed of our initiative. And thereby we also became slack. Because साहब वो नौकरी तो उसको ही मिलनी है, जो पैसे देगा उसको मिलेगा, जो उसका होगा उसको मिलेगा. तो we lost the motivation to compete, to work, and we became self-assuming. वो जेटली जी कहा करते थे कि अगर रास्ते में खड्डा भी आ जाए तो कहते हैं कि यार कोई कश्मीर वाला आके खड्डा लगा गया. So now we will have that sense of being equitable and equal citizens, and I think that's a huge reform, but that is going to take time. वैसे वो शास्त्रों में लिखा होता है कि संस्कार बदलने में 3 पीढ़ियां लगती हैं. If a grandfather has grown up in penury, in poverty, he would have that mentality of hoarding up everything to save for the child to be educated. When the child grows up seeing his father, he becomes a little more liberal, and the third generation then has a different kind of sanskara. So it will take 1 generation at least to change the mindset, but the beginning of the change of the mindset has been made. And therefore, I would just conclude by saying that soon after the second term of the Modi government began, and I think we had the first cabinet meeting on possibly 31st of May 2019, and after that, Prime Minister Modi made it very categorical. He said, I wish to give Jammu and Kashmir the same kind of focus, and he said so even after the change in the arrangement and the UT having come in, that I wish Jammu and Kashmir to be given a similar kind of focus and attention as was being given to the Northeast. Because Northeast was placed very high on the priority of the government working in 2014 itself. And when we came in 2014, the conditions in Northeast were much worse compared to Jammu and Kashmir. You had road blockades happening for months together, 3 months, 4 months. In Manipur, you had for 6 months together. You had militancy of a very high magnitude. When a government car would drive down the road, you would have terrorists firing from the hilltop just to make their presence felt. All this is over now. There were states which had never seen a train, like for example, Meghalaya, Arunachal Pradesh. You have regular trains running now. You didn't have an airport in Sikkim, which is one of the most cherished destinations for tourists. So, and today, Northeast is being cited as an example, as a model of development in the rest of India. And therefore, I'm sure with the kind of impetus, the kind of prioritization with which the Modi government and Prime Minister Modi is himself according to Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh, there is no reason why this should not happen in Jammu and Kashmir. And if we could do it in Northeast, there is no reason why we can't do it in Jammu and Kashmir. And I'm sure with all these good things happening, we would also have a sense of self-esteem of being the children of the Dogra land, not for the sake of using Dogra as a tag for recognition or identification, but as an unspoken sense of identity within. Thank you very much, Ayush. Ayushman, thank you.
So, So if you may indulge me,
Sure,
I
sure.
wanted to ask a couple of questions as well. Uh, so I wanted to ask. I remember on the 5th of August this year, commemorating 1 year of abrogation, Article 370. There was an article came up in Aaj Tak which said that which talked about the Kathua cable bridge, saying that Kathua is in Kashmir, and it got a lot of flack for saying Kathua was in Kashmir, and they had to put out a correction after that. Sorry, Kathua is in Jammu. And beyond that, when other journalists were also talking about application of Article 370, it was all about the Kashmiri people. The Dogras, the Ladakhis were not there in that entire narrative. And even after 1 year, when Dogra identity did get a sense of recognition in that fight to abrogate Article 370, yet it took a generation for change. Do you think Dogra identity and Jammu identity coming into the mainstream will take at least a generation?
See, that's what I was precisely saying is that, of course, merely making it officializing may not be sufficient to serve the kind of purpose that we are looking for. And therefore, the change of mindset takes time. And it might not sound very flattering, but may I tell you, even in the time of Maharaja, he was often referred to as Maharaja of Kashmir all over the world, not as Maharaja of Jammu. And when we first time had a guest house of the state at Prithviraj Road in Delhi, it was known as Kashmir House. It was only later on when we had another guest house at Chanakyapuri, it got to be known as JK Guest House. But since formalized and an officialized position was also on the same lines, that actually supplemented this conditioning of mind. So, liberation at the official level at least will pave the way for further liberation at other levels.
Okay. So, also, I wanted to ask, you talked about equal distribution of resources post the abrogation of Article 370 and Jammu getting a lot of, in fact, the thing is the progress gaining a lot more momentum in Jammu as compared to Kashmir because of the situation in Kashmir. But online on Twitter, I get many questions about the status of 4G. Now there is a sentiment that, okay, there is a situation in Kashmir and you don't give them 4G because of a certain security situation. But why deny Jammu those same 4G services when in this day and age, as we are building Naya Bharat, all commerce, all levels of education, every part of life is moving online?
Yeah, now taking up the first part that you said about the development part, I was actually not I didn't base my lecture on the theme of development alone. Otherwise, Jammu is going to have is in fact having some of the national and international records in development in the last 1 year. For example, you have Asia's longest bridge, the Chennai Nashri Tunnel. Sorry, not the bridge, the tunnel. And it is the first major road project or first major government project in India, in whole of India, which is named after Dr. Sama Prasad Mukherjee. You have North India's first cable-free bridge, this Atal Setu in Basoli. You are going to have world's highest bridge, railway bridge in Riyasi, which is 35 meters higher than the Eiffel Tower. Incidentally, one of the French news agencies went there and did a story of that. You are going to have a metro train in Jammu in the next 3 years, which is rather an out-of-turn allocation because you have a whole lot of cities, even in your neighborhood, Chandigarh, Jalandhar, Ludhiana, they don't have a metro. So I think that is unprecedented. It's been given a priority which is to the extent of being favored out of way. Now, as far as this 4G specific is concerned, though I am not entitled to answer this, not even my mandate also, because this is something which the Home Ministry decides depending on the inputs that they receive and the intelligence inputs that they receive, to which you and I may not be privy. But as we have been made to understand, of course, I understand the constraint of not having 4G, particularly for the students and for the media persons, because in these types of real-time reporting, they do have constraint, and the students as well. But what we have been made to understand is that they have started the process of doing it in parts beginning from Udhampur and Bandipora. So let's hope we would have it in other parts as well. But when we discuss it with the security persons, they will tell you that the messages that you receive are from Jammu city. Kaisa Udhampur mein khul gaya to yahan kaun si khatra hai. But what we sometimes tend not to realize is that Jammu is a border district otherwise. So even where Professor Dhar is sitting is just about 20 kilometers away from the Pakistan border. So maybe the security people have their, but certainly all of us would wish that 4G gets restored, and let's hope they'll take a call.
And so we've also seen for so many months this crackdown on the terror network in the Kashmir Valley. What is your analysis of that roadmap to peace in the entire Union Territory?
No, I am firmly of the belief that this is the last phase of militancy or terrorism in Kashmir. And whatever is happening is also happening because the terrorists are on the run. They are under tremendous pressure. This has also happened after the new arrangement came in, after the setting up of the Union Territory, because the monitoring is being done directly by the Union Home Ministry. So there is no possibility of things going otherwise. And since the terrorists are on pressure, while on the run, they tend to hit the soft targets. But gradually, and I think what is more important is, and also very optimistic, that the common people, the common man walking in the streets of Srinagar now feels fatigued of all this. He wishes to be part of the mainstream. See, it's not a small achievement that we have something called Super 30 or 35 in Kashmir, a group trained with the assistance of the army. Even last year, we had about 35 children from the remote areas and coming from very downtrodden sections of society, lower socioeconomic strata, who had qualified IIT JEE. I think about 19 of them were in IIT, the rest of them were NITs, in spite of the militancy, because of the opening of these communication channels and the youngsters being much more informed than my generation was. They know what are the other avenues and opportunities which have been opened up by the Modi government in the rest of the country, and they don't want to miss out on that. They can see, the ascent of India rising as a frontline nation in the community of world, and they are actually very aspirational. So the level of aspiration of the common Kashmiri youth is much more now, much more awakened and much more aware. And therefore, they too wish to have, but of course, it's a wheel of fear which is preventing them. So I'm very optimistic that maybe by next season, we would have things entirely different, entirely changed.
Sir, and my final question, your government has righted a historic wrong by abrogating Article 370. But there was one more grave historic injustice, which was the exodus of the Kashmiri Pandits. What is the government's action plan on that? Is the situation in the state still not conducive for them to return?
No, I think gradually things are changing for the better. And ideally, the ideal situation would be one where you don't have to actually push anybody into moving back. The situation would be so welcoming because most of them would also have the craving to go back home because nobody wishes to leave their home and herd in the manner that they were driven out overnight. And then they were subjected to humiliation by being attacked motives. Kisi ne kaha, "Sahab, Jagmohan ne plot dene ke liye nikala hai." Kabhi I remember very well, that was way back in 1994. There was a gathering of this community and I was asked to speak, and I said at the time of the partition in 1947, which was the largest exchange of populations happening between India and Pakistan ever in the world history. Mohsin Bhopali, an Urdu poet who incidentally died during a mushaira only, he had commented on this exodus, and he said कि बेसबब लोग बदलते नहीं मनसक अपना, तुमने देखा है जलता हुआ नशेमन अपना. So anybody who says that Kashmiri Pandit left out of his own will actually does not realize the pain and agony of seeing one's house on fire. So they have the will, but obviously like any other human being, they would also like to feel secure enough. So I think this has to go hand in hand.
Okay, sir.
The more and more we are able to achieve an optimum security environment, the more and more also will be the motivation on their part voluntarily as well. And as far as the government is concerned, of course, the government has been keen, government is working on it, it's been always planning and strategizing in that direction. But I think it will be a multifactorial outcome of the entire environment over there, which is, as I said, maybe this is the last phase of the nightmare that we have suffered in the last 30 years. So once this nightmare is off, things would automatically get back to where they were.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Jitendra Singh, for that insightful and comprehensive lecture, and for answering questions as well. J&K is now on the track to achieve Vikas, and our faith is with the government, because this government had the guts to correct a historic wrong and to create a sense of Akhand Bharat, which is one India and one constitution. One country can't have two prime ministers, as you rightly said. And we hope the drive remains strong and J&K be brought at par with the rest of the country. And at the same time, I want to thank Professor Monica Sethi and Professor Manoj Dhar for joining us for this great kind of talk, and listen to Jitendra Singh sir and encourage us to keep the momentum running to promote Dogra culture and Dogra pride. Dogra revival, in my opinion, is the need of the hour, and with flag bearers like Dr. Jitendra Singh leading the charge, it is the need of the hour to leverage who we are and promote who we are and what we are capable of. We are from Jammu. We are the land of poets, warriors, and kings. And in the words of the great warrior Themistocles, I would like to say, blood we sow, but iron we reap. So we are known for our sense of perseverance. With perseverance alone, we have to think of a brighter future and of promoting and leveraging our culture beyond the tag of identity, like Dr. Jitendra Singh rightly said. So thank you so much for all of you for joining us for the first Kuvar Yogi Memorial Trust lecture. And
thank you so much, sir.
With all your blessings, we'll keep our mission going strong. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
Namaskar.